What's up, everybody? We just recorded another episode of The Money Huddle, where we talk about some of the things that are coming out of DC, some financial planning ideas that you can be thinking about and considering right now. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to The Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
All right, welcome back to another episode of The Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with Ross Marinell. Ross, how you doing today, bud?
Michael, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah.
It's nice outside, but stuck at the house still. This is second virtual podcast.
Virtual video is the wave of the future. It's the wave of the future. So I wanted to kick off by asking your thoughts on something that kind of slid under the radar, at least for me a little bit, since we are off of our normal sports following agenda, since there are no sports right now. But your Indianapolis Colts have signed Phillip Rivers to a one-year deal for $25 million. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts were about that as a Colts fan.
What's our Super Bowl odds? Let's go. What's holding us back?
I don't know. You tell me.
We're going to bring Phillip Rivers to the promised land.
We're tanking for Trevor Lawrence here in the Carolinas. David Tepper has he has obliterated the Panthers. I don't know if I can name 5 people that'll be on the roster next year.
Well, I'm excited. A lot of changes are happening in the NFL. There's so many. It's like the player carousel this year is now included quarterbacks. So we'll have to talk about that as we get closer to the football season and cross our fingers that there will be a football season. But no, I'm excited. We haven't had a big name quarterback in action in a while.
Yeah.
Especially since Andrew Luck retired.
I know that's interesting though. That's a lot of money. $25 million. I guess it's not top shelf franchise QB money, but it's $25 million for one season.
We'll take it. What are we complaining about? $25 million for a quarterback. Let's do it. That's the going rate.
My second question is I saw something, a blurb yesterday that Antonio Brown was working out with Lamar Jackson. Do you think AB gets back in the league this year, or do you think he's done?
He's coming back.
He's coming back. He's too good. He's too good not to, right? Somebody will deal with the headache.
They will. They'll give him a chance. So, all right. Well, we haven't talked sports in a little while, so we had to get a little something in there. But
sadly, there's nothing going on to talk about.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on in the retirement world with legislation that affects people, our listeners. So whether it's you're in retirement or you're approaching it, we had some big regulation passed. And so, Michael, why don't you kick us off? So the CARES Act is out. We've got several components of this we wanted to touch on today for our listeners.
There's been just an immense amount of legislation that's been passed out by Congress. They passed the Families First Act. They've now passed the CARES Act, and they've done the stimulus money and other things. So there's just tons of stuff out there, and they've done it so quickly that there's a lot of, I don't want to say misinformation, but there's a lot of just various talking points that are being floated out there. So we'll try to focus in on a couple that we think are relevant for folks that are in their retirement years. First of all, number one is in the most recent legislation that was passed, the CARES Act. One of the things that happened is for folks who need to or usually are taking required minimum distributions from their retirement accounts, that they have been suspended or waived for 2020. So what that means is that if you were supposed to take a required minimum distribution from any type of account, so if it's a beneficiary IRA, an IRA that you've inherited, or whether you were doing the 5-year rule or you were trying to do a stretch strategy, you do not have to take that RMD for this year. And then also people who were, making their ongoing RMDs, they were already over 70 and a half before they even the Secure Act changed it. Those people don't have to take RMDs. And then the next thing is that folks who are due to take their first RMD this year, they no longer have to do that either. So basically, no required minimum distributions this year. There could be some ways to explore trying to um, get the genie back in the bottle if you've already taken your RMD for this year. But this is early enough in the year that unless somebody was, systematically making withdrawals, or they already took it at the beginning of the year, for folks who have not yet taken it, since the traditional deadline for RMDs is December 31st, those people can be relieved to know that they don't have to take any money out this year if they don't need to.
Yeah, this is pretty big news because the last time this happened was back in the financial crisis, back in 2008, where
Sure.
RMDs were suspended. So the logic is your withdrawal value, the value of your account is based on the account balance at the end of the preceding year. So
Right.
December 31st, 2019. Well, at that point, your account balance may be substantially higher than where it is, at the start of April this year. So that's the logic in it. They don't want people to have to take a withdrawal based on a value that doesn't exist in their account any longer. So there is I did see some news that if you have already taken some required minimum distributions, that you should be. It seems like there is a way for you to make that kind of contribution back to the account, so you can kind of retro put it back. So I
Yeah.
haven't seen specifics of technically how to do that, but we'll get some more details on that. But it's nice that that's an option, because if somebody was planning proactively and they took some required minimum distributions early in the year, they were taking
Hmm.
it monthly, it's nice that they at least have the choice to go back and replenish their account balances and not have to take that income distribution this year. And like you said, that includes beneficiary IRAs and also like the 5-year withdrawal rule. So if you're in a inherited account, you're taking that distribution out over the 5-year period, 2020 is not going to be counted as one of those years. So literally, you'll now have 6 years to take the
Yes.
full distributions out.
So that's a neat thing that they did. Obviously there are some people that are going to have to take money out because they need it to pay bills and do things that they were going to do. But for those who maybe have other sources of income or other sources of liquidity where they don't need to or want to touch their retirement accounts for required minimum distributions, they don't have to this year, which is great.
Yes. So another part of that, go ahead, Michael. I'm thinking I know where you're going.
Where? No, you go.
So another part of that is that if you have a coronavirus related issue and you need to withdraw IRA funds and you're younger than age 59 and a half, normally if you make a withdrawal from your IRA account before age 59 and a half, there's a 10% withdrawal penalty. It now seems that the IRS is going to waive that 10% withdrawal penalty if you need to tap resources in your retirement accounts for the purpose of filling a gap, whether it's a loss of income or medical expense from.
Yeah. So that piece is a little bit more interesting because essentially what they've done is they've said, okay, it's coronavirus related distributions, like you said. If you're younger than 59 and a half, they're going to waive the 10% penalty, but they do have some caveats there. You have to take the money out in 2020, and you have to be diagnosed with the virus or have a spouse or dependent diagnosed with the virus. Obviously, as we're seeing, there's going to be more and more people that qualifies them. Or it says, like you said, experience adverse financial consequences, or owned a business or unable to work because of lack of childcare. So the way I read this is that the language that they put together and the language that they've had in a lot of these bills has been very broad, and I think they're making it broad intentionally. So the one thing that I would caution anybody is, if you're going to pursue something where you're going to make these withdrawals, just be ready to have documentation of some kind, so that, if you are asked down the road to verify, you took it, according to the rules, you can do it. Like I said, the rules are going to apply, I think, very broadly because of the way they've defined it, but don't don't think that when the dust settles that there won't be people getting caught for doing things they shouldn't be doing. And to that point, there was actually a story that was being circulated on one of the websites online the other day, and it was talking about people that were trying to get cute from a planning standpoint, trying to use this $100,000 without the penalty and making some type of Roth contribution or conversion, and it was really wonky. And what I would just caution anybody is, I don't think that the intent or the spirit of what they are doing is for us to get cute from a financial planning standpoint and try to, circle around what the real intent or the spirit of the law is. That doesn't mean that there could not be opportunities that, come from this that we will actively look for, but I wouldn't want to try to bend the rules right now with what's happening, because this is a neat opportunity, especially for people who have been harmed by this, to be able to access some of their retirement funds, not have to pay the 10% penalty. And the way that they've structured it is you can put the money back, and you can also spread the tax liability over a 3-year period. So instead of taking, a huge tax hit this year, and that in itself could be a planning opportunity, because if this year, if you've lost your job, it's going to be a low income tax year. Your taxes may be much lower this year, and you can afford to take more on this year as taxable income. Or if you still have a strong income but you've been impacted, you can spread the liability over a 3-year period, which I think is pretty cool.
And in fact, part of that regulation is you can actually replace the money.
Yes.
So if you're in a short-term spot where you cannot, you need it to make ends meet because you've lost your job, if you find yourself back in full employment in a few months and things are rolling, you can actually make contributions back into that account to replace that withdrawal you initially made.
Right. You can put the money back.
Yeah, you can put the money back. But I want to make one point. So just because the IRS is waiving the 10% early withdrawal penalty, you still owe whatever your federal and state taxes are. So make sure you're working with your tax professional, know what your tax liability could be, and don't forget that it's there. So
No.
just because you're withdrawing an IRA without the penalty doesn't mean you don't owe tax on it.
They haven't waived the taxes. They waived the early withdrawal penalty. They didn't say, hey, you can make a tax-free, penalty-free withdrawal from your IRA, because I think that would just create this monsoon of withdrawals for a lot of people.
Right.
So it's good to know about that. What other stuff you've been looking at this last week?
Well, look, I know this has been out for a few days, but I did want to cover this because I do think there's one planning opportunity here. And so we know that there's the relief package, right? The initial 2 trillion coronavirus aid package that is offering cash payments to people, individuals, based on their adjusted gross income. So the limits are single filers, individuals earning less than 75,000 can expect a one-time cash payment of $1,200. Married couples would each receive a check, and families would get $500 per child. But the thresholds are, if you're married filing jointly, the household income needs to be under $150,000 to receive the full payment. Singles is 75,000, and I think head of household is like $112,500.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay, so you get $1,200 each for the spouses, and then an additional $500 per child. And then there's a phase out. So if you make more than 150,000 but less than 198,000, you'll get a little something. But so it's basically $5 for every 1,000. So the key thing is that they're looking at either your 2018 or 2019 tax returns. So if you've already filed 2019, then that's the year that they're going to use.
Right.
But if you have not filed your 2019 tax return yet, you should work with your tax professional and figure out if 2018 will qualify you for, a cash payment, 2019 won't, then maybe you file an extension and wait until, because they've already given a little extension on filing the tax returns anyway.
Right.
If 2018 doesn't qualify you for, but 2019 would, then you may want to work with your tax professional and hurry up and file, because that could be the difference of you getting one of these stimulus checks or not.
No, absolutely. And just because if you speak with someone who's helping you with your taxes and they tell you that, actually it makes more sense for you to go ahead and file 2019 because your AGI was lower, or it qualifies you for, a greater stimulus payment or rebate. That doesn't mean when you file, you actually still have to pay the day you file. They still move the deadline back for requiring payment. So I know a lot of people think that when I file, I pay, because that's typically how we do, right? When we pay when we file, or a lot of people do. Doesn't mean you're going to have to, if you owe taxes, you're not going to have to come up with the money right then to pay taxes. They still push the deadline for payments back, but you could go ahead and file. You can go ahead and file and wait to make your payment.
Right. Well, one more change that came about was the loan limits on 401k loans and participating plans. So it looks like the allowed loan limit can now be increased to the lesser of $100,000 or 100% of the participant's vested account balance. So this applies to loans made on or before September 23rd. And I guess a part of that is they're also going to allow deferment of the repayment, um, could be delayed up to 1 year for qualifying employees. So
Right.
if you need access to capital, you have a 401k with a vested balance, then it may be worth exploring some of the loan options there where you could borrow from your 401k, repay it over a period of time, and then not have that taxable event potentially.
Yeah, that would be definitely something I would talk to your HR about. They should be getting guidance on that, because that was another thing that came out of that bill, that they were supposed to, extend that out to people. So hopefully, you know, um, that people can get the right information and make good choices about, opportunities for them. So let's saying opportunities. What are some positive opportunities you think people have right now?
Well, I think this is if people have considered Roth conversions in the past and maybe held off for whatever reason. It might have
Hmm.
been maybe their income was just a little higher than normal and they didn't want to have the additional income tax. Maybe the assets that they might convert might have been a little, or at all-time highs or a little higher. This could be an opportunity for those individuals that have traditional IRA accounts to consider doing Roth conversions.
Hmm.
Look at your income tax for the year. Look at the assets that you might be able to convert, because in some cases you can just take a current position and just convert, kind of move it into a Roth account that counts as
Right.
a conversion. And if that asset, let's say it's a stock that's down 20 or 30%, if it's something you believe or you want to hold long term, now might be a good time to consider doing that, moving so depreciated assets over into a Roth account. You do have to pay income tax on the, remember that's included in your income for the year. So you
Right.
got to be prepared to pay tax on that. But you could potentially change that structure from a traditional IRA to a Roth.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're referring to there is for people is what we call an in-kind Roth conversion. So a very, very oversimplified way of explaining that is, let's say that I have a stock that's worth $100, and for whatever reason, this specific stock was just pummeled by this downturn, and I've lost 50% in that one stock. I don't have to sell my shares of stock to make a conversion. I can do what's called an in-kind conversion and just move those shares over from an IRA to a Roth IRA, instead of having to pay tax on what was $100, per share value, that's now $50 per share. I'm paying tax on the fair market value at the date of conversion, which is much, much lower. So if I think that, that stock's going to rebound here in short order, that could be a very, a very cost effective way to do a Roth conversion. And in seasons like this are where, you can, you know, make lemonade out of lemons, so to speak, when it comes to things like that.
Especially if, consider this, if you were already expecting to have to take required minimum distributions, if you don't need those distributions to support your lifestyle, where you were literally taking them because you had to,
Right.
now that you do not have to take those required minimum distributions this year, this could be perfect
Yeah,
timing to instead of taking the R&D, maybe you do a Roth conversion. So
absolutely.
it's something worth considering for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Another thing we talked about is still an opportunity. Mortgage rates are still extremely low. I'm not sure. I saw something the other day that said, applications for mortgages had fallen significantly. I think, that's part and parcel because everyone's being told to stay home and not go anywhere and, shelter in place and, all these other things. But I think right now, rates are extremely low for people who might be looking to do a refinance or, restructure their mortgage and right size it for a different payment schedule. This is a great opportunity because we know interest rates. The Federal Reserve has cut the federal funds rate down to zero, and not only that, Jerome Powell, the chair, has said that they're going to leave rates as low as possible. I mean, as long as they need. So there's not going to be a hurry or a rush to try to raise rates again. So we're back to that zero interest rate policy by the Fed.
Well, this is a good opportunity if you have a longer term loan, like a 30-year loan. Evaluate options to move down to maybe a 20-year term or a 15-year term. Knocking significant amount of payments out over time can be helpful for sure. You can save yourself a substantial amount of interest payments, especially if you can lower your interest rate. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people who have gotten loans over the last few years that already have pretty low rates, but um, they've reached levels that we haven't seen in a long time. So if you think that might be helpful, it might be worth looking into it. Now, one of the challenges we have here is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? We have these great mortgage loan rates, but we also are about ready to have the highest number of unemployment numbers we've seen maybe ever, right?
Yeah.
So of course you have to qualify for that loan, and so really consider your timing for that application. How's your employment? How's your cash flow? What's your status at work? If it's not in the cards right now because you've been laid off temporarily, when you get back to work full time, that's an opportune moment to check those rates out.
Yeah, and since you mentioned unemployment, I think it would be um, worthwhile to touch on that briefly, just because we are going to see some just staggering unemployment numbers, and my opinion on that has been pretty much the same from day one. Number and it's essentially the way that um, businesses have been forced to close and or drastically reduce operations, that by itself is going to result in people being laid off from work and or being furloughed. But the other thing is the way that Congress approached their legislation with this. One of the first things that came out was the Families First Act, and that was the one that extended paid sick leave, it extended emergency FMLA leave. And I think that I understand the intent behind that piece of legislation because they wanted, people who are sick or dealing with, family members that were sick, to be able to stay at home and not, have a fear of losing their job. And but again, the language for qualifying was so extremely broad. I mean, the paid sick leave was, if you need to go get tested or if you have symptoms, and we're in the middle of cold and flu season where there's 14 days paid sick leave for some employees. And then you have that family, the FMLA is if your kid's school was closed. Well, how many schools closed or shut down? So there's another 12 weeks. And my thought on that, just as a business owner, said business owners are not going to pay that. They are not going to take on that burden to pay employees. And then the way that the government was offering to help the businesses pay for it was through payroll tax credits or loans. And I just, it's just business. I think I've got a real heart for business owners because a lot of them are just, they're survivors and they're going to batten down the hatches and they're just going to do what it takes to survive. And in a lot of cases, that means the business owner themselves are going to say, well, no, how much responsibility can I take over and work? I'm going to let my employees, I'm going to furlough my employees, or I'm going to let my employees go so they can go file unemployment, which is also what the federal government did, is extended and expanded unemployment to where there's an additional amount of money available on top of the state unemployment check that they would get, which is, I think that I understand that this was a lot of stuff that they had to do very quickly, but I think the way that the legislation was crafted is going to result in just higher unemployment numbers than we would normally see if in an apples to apples scenario, just because they're basically telling the business owners, hey, you have to pay sick leave, pay FMLA leave, but if you still want to operate and you don't have employees, then what are you going to do? So they're just gonna, they're gonna let people go, let them file unemployment, and they're gonna try to limp through this thing. That's been my view from just about the beginning.
Well, look, I think just as investors, we need to brace ourselves that the unemployment numbers for the next few weeks are going to be startling.
Yeah.
And we know why. We know what's happening. We know that a lot of this is precautionary to slow the spread of the coronavirus. And we need to accept that this is what we're working with for the next few weeks. And so, there's some support level. There's some support out there for those folks that have very, very unfortunately lost their jobs, right? And like you said, there's a little bit of additional unemployment insurance.
Right.
There are some expanded benefits there. For the business owners themselves, there are some relief packages through loans and through some grants, potential grants, which we can talk about here in a little bit,
Sure.
where they can hopefully maintain more of their staff and not have to let those individuals leave. And so, there with that, you want to talk a little bit about the two different loan programs that are available? I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but I
Right.
want to let people know what's there so that they can start to investigate what might be right for their business.
So there's two programs that we've seen so far, or the two that I've seen mentioned the most. Is one is the economic disaster, economic injury, disaster loan. I think it's called EIDL, EIDL loan. That one is you apply directly with the SBA, the Small Business Administration, right? Is it administration or association? I don't know. SBA. You right. You right with the SBA. And then the other one is the Paycheck Protection, you know, type of loan, PPP loan. And I had a pretty long conversation today with someone, and again, I can't stress enough. These packages were put together so quickly that we are all financial professionals, banks, tax professionals. We are all getting information and guidance in real time. Like we're doing this, a lot of people are doing this on the fly. Banks, I know banks were having conference calls today because they have to start taking applications tomorrow, and some banks haven't even sorted out exactly what their process is going to be. That's how quickly this has been put together. So the first thing I would say is number one is if you are a business owner or self-employed individual or somebody that would otherwise qualify under what they're saying these loans are for, you should apply, but you should also know and understand what you are applying for, because this isn't quote unquote free money from the government. This is potentially a forgivable loan, but you have to play by the rules and do what is being asked for you, to qualify for that loan forgiveness. So there's some neat programs out there, and I think that the businesses can leverage them to help them stay the course and get through this. But please know, talk to your tax professional, talk to your banking professionals, whoever you bank with, to get guidance on the best loans for you personally, and we'll find out if you qualify, and then which one would be the best one for you to qualify for.
And so the real trick is going to see there will be a flood of applications.
Oh yeah.
They're already starting, right, for the idle loan. The key here is going to be how quickly can these entities respond? How quickly can they get income payments, checks and loan payments to the individual business owners to
Right.
help them maintain their staff? Certainly with the Paycheck Protection Program, this is about trying to maintain your staff, pay your utilities, pay rent, pay sort of the essential business expenses, right, that you would need just to maintain your doors. and a portion of that could be forgivable. That's the Paycheck Protection Program.
Right.
So I can only imagine how many businesses are going to apply. It is, I believe that is first come, first serve, meaning
Oh
so the
yeah.
first applications that get in and approved could get loans, whereas, someone who may wait 2 or 3 weeks, they'll know a little bit more about it, see how their business is responding. And,
Hmm.
it's potential that there may not be any resources left. So we'll
Yeah.
see how well they can review those applications, make decisions on who should qualify for a program and who shouldn't, and then deploy that money. Right
Yeah.
now, business is needed.
I th-
This is it.
I think there's those programs are going to be, well, I will be surprised if they are not massively oversubscribed with the amount of people requesting relief. You know, I think that, because a lot of people are going to say, hey, just apply and, try to get the money. Um, and so we'll just have to wait and see. It would not surprise me at all if they, well, one, I can't imagine that the SBA is going to be able to process the amount of loan applications they're going to see. Even the EIDL loan, the EIDL loan, that one, there was a provision in there that within, like, I think 3 days of application, whether they would potentially give you a $10,000 up front, um, within 3 days. And I'm like, there's no way they're going to meet that timeline.
Potentially a $10,000 grant
Yeah.
now, which would be forgivable. But again, the amount of applications are going to flood the system. It's not infinite resources here. But my point, and I'll leave it at this is like critical mass for small businesses out there that um, cannot operate under the restrictions of the the governors, right? If they've been told they can't work, they can't operate, this is it. Like, we've got to help these businesses because they literally cannot go to work. So we'll see how fast these loan applications get approved, how many people get approved, and how quickly they can get resources to folks to help keep their businesses open. And I sure hope they're ready, because if they're not, it's going to be could potentially be a disaster. But I hope they're ready.
Yeah. I mean, the way it seems to be structured is they're trying to get the money out as quickly as possible, and then they want to come back down the road and kind of double check to see how you use the money. Make sure that so it's being set up where they're telling you the rules of the road that they want to go by, but they're going to kind of try to get the money out as quickly as possible, because obviously we're up against the clock for a lot of businesses to be able to keep people on payroll, which is their goal. And then they want to come back down the road. So just the caution is make sure that you document yourself, document your use of funds, so that you give yourself the best chance possible to having this thing forgiven.
Right. Well, I think this is the big picture is, if we can keep these small businesses moving, if we can keep them staffed, and I think this will have a big effect of how quickly we can recover from this once we kind of have the A-OK to start to socialize again,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not just, can the grocery store deliver food, it's, do they have food to deliver? We've got to make sure our supply chains are running. We got to make sure that the essential businesses that move our economy along are there to actually be able to move it along. I think this is a really critical piece, and I think it will have some impact on how quickly we can recover big picture, from just GDP to getting people back to work, to potentially supporting and seeing revenues come back to our top 500 stocks.
Absolutely. So, just a quick recap for those. If you're supposed to take RMDs this year, you've been given a free pass. That doesn't matter if you had a beneficiary IRA where you were doing stretch IRA or 5-year rule. If this year was supposed to be your first year taking RMDs from your retirement accounts, or you've been regularly taking required minimum distributions, you do not have to take those distributions this year. You may want to take them, you're free to take them, but you are not being required to take them by the government. Couple of planning opportunities right now. Mortgage rates are still very low. This could be an opportunity for look at your debt structure with your mortgage, potentially refi, get a lower rate, potentially shorten your payment schedule. That's an opportunity you can look at. Make sure you investigate that if that's something that would be meaningful for you. If you've got IRA accounts where the account values are down significantly and you want to look at doing a Roth conversion, you do not have to sell positions and convert cash. You can do an in-kind conversion from an IRA to a Roth IRA, which is a great strategy for times like these where you can be doing something proactive and you're not selling out of the market. You're just literally changing the tax wrapper that those funds will be in for the long term. And then lastly, if you are eligible for these stimulus checks or any of these loans, we encourage you to reach out to a tax professional if you have one, or a financial professional, someone that can give you guidance on what you can do, how you might be able to qualify, what would make the most sense for you. It's a scary time out there. There's a lot of uncertainty, but the few things I can tell you is that nothing right now, what has happened is everyone understands what's going on. The uncertainty lies is like, how long will this new normal that we have persist? And that's where there's some uncertainty happening. But if we, once we see this thing, the curve starting to flatten and we start to see some of the clouds clear out, that will create a lot of clarity for not only business owners, but our overall economy in general. So hang in there. Don't be discouraged. Make the best of it. Make this a season that you can still win in. Look for those areas that you can control. And yeah, I mean, it looks like that's a pretty good recap of what we talked about. What do you think?
Absolutely, man. Do we need to go work part-time for the SBA to help approve some of these loans?
If I get hazard pay,
I might have a rubber stamp and just approve everybody.
how many pieces of paper am I going to have to handle that have been submitted? I imagine
Stay,
there's
stay,
that they
stay safe.
actually, what's that?
I said, stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey man, this was fun. And as always, if you enjoy listening to the show, please shoot us a note. Let us know some things we could talk about. I've already got a couple of notes of some things to touch on next time, Ross. So we'll make sure we touch on those. But if you enjoy listening, give us a shout. Shoot us a note on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. Our page is The Money Huddle. You can send us a message at themoneyhuddle@vcplanning.com. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.